everyone, and thanks for joining us at Joshua at our Environmental Justice Task Force meeting. Our meeting this month is our Indigenous seed banking event, where we're going to be learning the basics of Indigenous planting and seed banking methods, along with the cultural understanding that accompanies these ancient methods. My name is Bobby Webster, and I am the chair of the Environmental Justice Task Force, and we're very excited about this event. We are going to show just a couple of slides, our land acknowledgement. So let me get this up. Okay, how does this look? I think Maureen is muted. So I'm gonna read our land and labor acknowledgement really quickly. Joshua acknowledges the ancestral homeland and traditional territories of Indigenous peoples who have been here since time beyond memory or record. And we recognize the Ho-Chunk Nation and the Menominee Nation as the original first people of Wisconsin. We recognize the Oneida Nation people who currently call Brown County home. We acknowledge the initial and continued benefits that colonizers have gained due to the free enslaved labor of Black people. We recognize the historic and present violations of and systemic sins against people and our values, and in response, we commit to a long-term agenda that creates structural racial equity. Joshua recently updated our mission, vision, and values. And so you can see on the slide, our mission: Joshua inspires and equips people to work together on systemic justice issues in northeastern Wisconsin. Joshua builds relationships in the public and private sector to advance issues that align with our core values. Vision, oops, sorry about that. Joshua envisions a fair and equitable future where everyone in Northeast Wisconsin is an active participant in building a strong and healthy community. Values. Joshua's core values are essential to our vision. Although we are composed of diverse faith-based organizations, we welcome people of all backgrounds. We believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. We believe in equity, education, advocacy, racial and social justice, and community and relationship building. And we left it open for questions before I take it over to Maureen.
No, that's actually at the end. So
I'm sorry, Maureen.
That's okay.
So with that, I will introduce our organizer, Maureen Perkins, and she does an immense amount of work for Joshua, and she's going to be introducing our speakers today.
Okay, hello, Segu. Yulele helha niun gets. Wagwahu niwa gita loda. Hello, she puts lightning on everything is what they call me. Wolf is my clan. I'm Maureen Perkins, and I'm the community organizer for Joshua. Thank you for joining us this evening. We appreciate your time and support. I'm excited to introduce our first speaker, Laura Manthe. Laura has served as the director of the United Nations Environmental Resources Board since 1996. She has led several large projects focused on cultural and natural resource conservation. Laura's success is attributed to her ability to engage the community throughout a project's design and lead interdepartmental and intergovernmental teams toward a shared vision. When she's off the clock, Laura personifies the spirit of community service and can often be found volunteering at community events and fundraisers. Her greatest volunteer effort yet has been coordinating Olagu, a cooperative of 20 Oneida families that grows traditional corn. Laura's tireless efforts have raised over $100,000 for the project in just 5 years and grown a total of 20,000 pounds of corn. For fun, she and her husband, Robin, make and sell Haudenosaunee beadwork and jewelry. She truly embodies the Oneida name. She walks over the clouds because nothing seems to hold her down. Thank you, Laura, for joining us, and we cede the floor to you.
Oh, thank you. Sagwali Sagwake, Yostayowaliats Nyunyaks, Laura Manthe, Nyunyaks Osunige, Oneateaga. Hello, thank you for joining us for this workshop. I'm proud to present to you the story of our Ohelagu, our nonprofit organization. And I'm going to be sharing with you a slideshow that talks about our project in detail. Can you see the screen?
Let's see. I think that you need to share.
Okay,
Just
I'll
go
try
to
it
share
again.
the screen sharing.
Let's see. I will have to escape this. I will
Should be
try it again. Let's see. Share the screen.
Yep.
There we go.
And
Okay. This one and share. Okay, that's better. Sorry about that.
Yes.
Technical difficulties. I usually don't run the projector. I usually just do all the talking. So we're going to talk today about Oneida foodways, Native foodways, and Oneida perspective. This is a map of the Great Lakes area, and where number 20 is on the map is where Oneidas are originally from. It is now the state of New York. And we migrated to Wisconsin. We were landed here in 1822. We went through the Great Lakes. The boat that we rode on was called Walking on the Water, and it was in such bad shape that some of our relatives got off of the boat and decided to stay in Canada, in Ontario, and the rest of us made the journey all the way to what is now Green Bay. And on the return ship, the boat sunk in the water. So it just tells you what a harrowing trip it was for our relatives. Another thing to consider was that when our relatives landed in Green Bay, they had brought their seeds with them, and they had to decide that fall if they were going to eat the seeds because they were hungry, or if they were going to save them to plant the next season. And they decided to save their seeds, and we still grow those seeds today in this community. So our relatives were really looking out for us a long time ago. And that is one of the core central values of Haudenosaunee people, is to think 7 generations when you're making a decision, not just about yourself or at the present time. This is a picture of what is called North America, and it is also in the shape of a turtle. We call it Turtle Island. And when agriculture was coming up from Central South America and corn was making its way through the United States area or North America, they were also having an amazing food, food was being produced at the same time in Mesoamerica. So these two events were happening at the same time in history. Lots of food was being grown in what is now called Egypt, the same time that food was being grown in the United States. So one of us is not ahead of the other. These things are happening in tandem. This is a picture of what is a Hiawatha flag, and it tells you what the different nations are that are part of the Iroquois Confederacy. The Seneca Nation, the Cayuga Nation, the Onondaga Nation, the Oneida Nation, and the Mohawk Nation. And those are our relatives, and they are all still alive, vibrant, and living in what is now the state of New York. And that's an important part of the story that I wanted to share with you. This is a beautiful painting by the late Bruce King, and it shows how our people came to this planet. And we came through a woman called Sky Woman. She fell through the sky, and you can see in her hands she has seeds and flowers and all the things that she needs to survive. And those are the plants that we still grow today. So our corn, which is what I'm going to be talking about today, is part of our creation story. It's part of our great law. It's part of the Code of Handsome Lake, and it's mentioned many times. We have 2 separate ceremonies for corn. So it's really a huge part of our culture and identity. This is the 3 sisters. You might have heard of this kind of planting system where you have corn, beans, and squash all growing together. We would grow it in a mound. So the men were responsible for preparing the fields. And so they would clear a field area, and they would get the rows ready, and the women would go in and plant. And we have 3 clans. We have a bear clan, a turtle clan, and a wolf clan in Oneida. And the women would decide how many seeds they wanted to plant of what kind of food, but they would all plant together. So they would plant 1 row for the turtles, 1 row for the bears, and 1 row for the wolves. And they would go back to the 2nd row for the turtles, the 2nd row for the bears, and the 2nd row for the wolves. And they would keep planting like that until all of the seeds were planted. And the reason that they did that was so that not one clan got the best seeds, and the wolf clan ended up with all the crummy seeds at the end. So everything that we did was diplomatic. We practiced democracy and everything that we did because we had to live together and we had to rely on each other to survive. The Three Sisters system, which we still use today, you prepare the field, you make mound of dirt, you bury a fish inside of the mound deep enough so the raccoons won't dig it out. And that provides the fertilizer and the nutrients that the corn needs to grow. And then when the corn comes out of the ground and is about 3 inches tall, then you can plant the beans. And the beans climb up the corn stalk and use it as a pole. And then you plant the squash around the outside of the mound, and that shades the mound, keeps the morning dew in, it suppresses the weeds, and the little critters don't like all the pricklies on the vines. And so that's a great way to keep pests out of your garden. Some people call this regenerative planting, companion planting, low-till, organic, biodiverse, or harmonized, but we call it the hipsters of regenerative planting. This is a calendar. It looks like a turtle to you with a bunch of pictures on it, but it's actually our ceremonial calendar for our people. On the back of the turtle's back, there's 13 plates, and each one of those represents one of our ceremonies or one of our moons. And then around the edge of the turtle shell, there are 28 little plates, and those are the 28 days of the month. So our calendar is 13 months long. And in that calendar, we have a cyclical system of giving thanks for everything that we have. We give thanks to the thunders, we give thanks at midwinter, we give thanks to the strawberries as the first fruit of spring. We have a planting ceremony, we have a bean ceremony, we have green corn ceremony, we have a harvest ceremony in the fall, and it just keeps going all the way around again. So some of the things we give thanks for are maple syrup and the four-legged animals, the wingeds, and the fish. So this is a really great picture of what it looked like during village time. So before European contact, we had all the medicines we needed. We had all the food that we needed to survive. We had our own democracy. We never had a jail or a prison because we had our own laws to regulate ourselves. And everyone in our community had a job to do. So historians and anthropologists have looked back at the writings of the first Europeans that came here, and they figured out that our women only worked 12 hours per week. The men worked 10 hours a week. And the rest of the time was for leisure. So you see a woman sitting on the ground and she's doing pottery. Another woman is hanging up corn to dry or drying fish, and another woman is pounding corn for the next meal. And then the men in the background are building a longhouse. And so sometimes you have to make your longhouse larger. And so what that is called is extending the rafters, because the longhouses belong to the women. And so the mother is a matriarch of the family, and her daughters live with her, and her daughters' daughters and sons live with her. And then when the people are of marrying age, the man leaves his mother's longhouse and moves in with his mother-in-law. So everything belongs to the women, the land, all the food, the houses, all the clothes, everything belonged to the women. And it was a really great way for our society to be. And like I said, we were the first peoples to provide democracy. We had direct democracy. So this is a picture of what the cornfields would have looked like. And you can see the Three Sisters mounds where the man is standing. There's a boy up on a palisade. So when I was talking to you earlier, I told you that everyone had a job, and you know how teenagers like to stay up all night and play video games or talk to their friends. In our time, what they would have to do is stay up all night and keep the critters out of the fields. So they had a job to do. If you're going to stay up all night, we're going to put you to work. So that's what that's about. This is a picture that shows you the trade routes that were here prior to European contact. And this is the interstate highway system. And those two things match up almost perfectly. So we would get around by running and walking. We weren't horse people, but we had trade that went all the way up into what is now Alaska and Canada and all the way down to Mexico. And we know that we had these trade routes because in our culture today, we still celebrate the alligator dance. That is a Seminole dance because Seminoles have alligators in their communities. We don't have alligators, and they celebrate one of our songs in their communities. So when you get Seminole people together and Iroquois people together, you have a real party because they really love to sing and dance together. So what happened? Why is it that we lost our perfect time, our steady state, the time where we're able to care for ourselves, provide all the medicine and housing and food that we needed to survive. And the biggest impacts to our people were when settlers came here, or colonists came here to our place, they brought disease with them, diseases that they had a way to fight in their country or an immunity to from living with their animals, but we didn't have that immunity. So when they landed on our shores and they tied up their boats to the docks, and the rats would run down the lines of the boats, and they would get onto our land and they would bring all of their vermin with them, all of their disease, and it impacted our people greatly. And the people would pray to try to find a solution to the diseases that were impacting them. But there's such a delay between the spirit world and the people world, and in our belief that the spirit world can only talk to us when we're sleeping. We weren't able to get the messages in time to provide the medicines that we needed to fight these diseases. And our people lost faith in our medicines. Our people lost faith in our democracy, and they turned to Christianity. And that's been a huge impact on our survival as a people and as even the way that we think today. This is the story of how we came to Wisconsin. That was a direct impact of the war that the colonists had with the British. So I'm talking about the Revolutionary War. And we became landless as a result of that war. We fought on the side of the colonists, and George Washington promised that he would never bother us, but he sent the Sullivan campaign in and burned all of our villages down. So if you want to learn more about that specific part of history, you can Google the Sullivan campaign and you can learn more about that and the amount of food that he burned and villages that he destroyed. So we were basically homeless in our own country, and we were convinced that we needed to move west. And that's how we had made a treaty with the Menominee Nation, the Ho-Chunk Nation, the Potawatomi Nation. The next thing that happened to us was the boarding school era, where our children were taken away from us when they were 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and they were put in boarding schools. Their hair was cut, their clothes were taken away, they weren't allowed to speak their language, and they were taught how to do menial labor. So when you take children away from society, they lose all of the time that they were supposed to be learning who they were as a people, and they lose the time to figure out what their gift is to share with the community. And they come home and they speak a different language than everyone else in the village, and they're not able to perform the duties that need to be done in order for the village to survive. So that was huge detriment to our people. So now it's 1976, and we have some women in our community that decided that they were good Christian women and they went to church. And if the church could have bingo, and if the church was sovereign and the tribe was sovereign, then the tribe should be able to have bingo too. And these are the ladies that started bingo in Wisconsin, here in Oneida. And they made so much money so fast that our people had to react to what to do with this large amount of money. And we decided early on to invest in infrastructure, education, and build up our community and buy our land back. So what we've done with that money over the time is invested in what is called integrated food systems or a vertical food system. So we have an apple orchard that has over 25 varieties of trees. We have a buffalo grass-fed beef and grass-fed buffalo system. We have a cannery to process our foods. We have an aquaponics program. We have a Junehaqua farm that grows organic white corn, and we have a Oneida Farmers Market on Thursday where you can put it all together, or you can go to Oneida One Stop to find some of these items. So what we're trying to do in our community now is get back to our steady state, and I honestly feel the best way to do that is through food. So we have a lot of backyard gardeners that grow food, and they have little patches of corn, maybe a 10 by 10 area, and the raccoons come by and they take everything out in one day. You get so frustrated because you put all this time and money and effort and energy into growing food, and the critters come and take it out in one day. So we decided that in order to remedy that situation, that we needed to grow our corn together collectively. Because if you can grow a big enough field, there's no way that the raccoons can take it out in one day. So I put a call out to our community, and this was in 2016, and asked them to come so that we could talk about growing white corn together, and we talked about soil health. And it was really amazing. We had 75 people show up to this meeting. So from that meeting, we decided that we were going to grow corn cooperatively. So a lot of people have community gardens. A lot of Hmong people have really beautiful gardens where they have little designated plots for each one of the families to grow in. And we do ours differently. We pool all of our corn seeds together. We plant them all together. We harvest them together, and we eat them together. So we were able to find a name that we could all pronounce, Ohelagu, which means among the corn stalks. And we meet monthly. Before the pandemic, we were able to meet in person, but now we have to meet on Zoom meetings. And we have 2 facilitators in our group that do TOPS facilitation, so they can do all the facilitating for a meeting. Every year we do a SWOT analysis, and we do a letter of commitment to each other. And we're trying 3 different ways to grow our corn so that we can learn more about conservation planting, so we feed the soil. And I'll take you a little bit on that journey. So in this field, our corn needs to be grown in areas where there's not a lot of other corn growing near it, because a lot of corn that's commercially grown in the United States is genetically modified corn. And what that means is that it is meant to be Roundup ready, so that the farmer can spray pesticides, herbicides, insecticides right on the corn plants, and it won't impact the corn. Our corn is heirloom variety, and that means that it's open pollinated, so it can accept pollen from any other corn plant, and it will accept the genes from that pollen. So we have to protect our corn, and we have to grow it in areas that's surrounded by trees. And we also do something called rotational growing. So we're not growing in the same spot year after year after year. We actually move our cornfield over every year. So we'll start on the 3.5 acres, then we'll move to the 3.0 acres, then we'll move to the 2.9 acres. Then we'll move to the next 2.9 acres, and we give the other fields a year to rest. And by the time we come back to them, 5 years have gone by. And that's a really great way to restore your soil. We use cover cropping in this field. And we also do something called intercropping, where after the corn is planted, we plant clover in between the rows to give the nitrogen fix to the corn. So we wrote a grant to SARE, Sustainable Agriculture Research Education, and we asked them for help trying to figure out how we can use the old method of burying a fish in the corn mounds, but instead use it in a modern application. So we decided we were going to use fish emulsion, and we sprayed it on the corn plants as they were growing before they tassel. And that would give the plants the nutrients that they need. So again, we're talking about companion planting, low-till, no-till, crop rotations, cover crops, and organic amendments. And this is all to feed the soil. So the soil has a microbiotic life in it. It has fungi and it has bacteria. And you want as many of those different varieties at the same time in your soil, because the stronger those things are, the stronger your soil is and the more nutrients you get in your food. One of the things that we had to talk about as a group was weeding our rows. So we hosted something called Braiding the Sacred the first year that we grew corn together. And we got scolded by our relatives because we had a really weedy field. And so we had to come up with a system so that people would know where they were supposed to weed. So we made little markers, and there's one for my daughter, Leah. So she knows she has 3 rows that she has to weed, and she knows where to stop and where to start. And that really helps you with figuring out where your job is when it's done. And we work with a lot of universities, and they can't believe how clean our rows are, and they're done by hand. We don't use any kind of herbicides or pesticides or anything to keep those rows. We do it all by hand. We do not have child labor in our group. We have something called Passing Down Traditions, and this is Delilah, and she helps us pick rocks every spring when we're getting ready to plant. And we have a lot of youth in our group. We have a lot of elders in our group, so it's not uncommon to have 3 generations working together on this project. And that's a really great way to share knowledge, to build up capacity in our group, and to help people with their, caring for their children. In my personal family, I always tell my kids that they weren't just raised by me, they were raised by the whole Oneida community. So they have lots of moms that they have to listen to. So here's our sprayer that we use to spray the fish emulsion onto the fields. Again, this is a organic way to get nutrients right directly into the plants. And there's my husband, Mr. John, and he is showing off how tall his corn plants are. They're about 16 feet tall. We had a really great year that year. We had all the nutrients that we needed. Some of the corn plants gave us 3 cobs per plant, and that's very unusual. So we've been very lucky and very blessed to have some years where we have 10,000 pounds of corn that we have to pull off the field. And we've had some really rough years where we've only had 1,000 pounds of corn. So it really depends on the season. It depends on if it's a wet year, if it's a dry year, you know, there's so many variables to being a successful farmer. So now we're ready for harvesting, and we have to handpick every one of the corn cobs in the field. A modern farmer who grows genetically modified corn can use a combine, and he can go by and pick up all his corn in one day. Sometimes when you drive down the highway, you see all the corn stalks and all the corn is pointing up directly at the same height because they've been bred to do that. Where our corn is heirloom, so that corn stalk can throw a cob anywhere from below your knee to above your head. There's no consistency, so we can't use machinery to pick our corn. And some of our cobs are 24 inches long, and machinery doesn't like that kind of variation either. They like consistency. So we hand pick the corn every year as a group. So last year we had pandemic, and we were told to put a mask on to go out in the field, and we did that. We were told to stay 6 feet away from each other, and we were able to do that. We were told to leave all the doors open in the barn to let the air come through, and we did that. And we were still able to pick 2,000 pounds of corn and get it braided and hung up in the barn, even during the tough time of a pandemic. So earlier I talked to you about how the settlers came to this country and they brought their disease with them, and our people gave up their ways, and they just decided to go with Christianity. And this has happened before. So in 600 AD, when the Romans were in charge, they had a really horrible pandemic that came through there too. And people were falling dead in the street. And the people then believed in Zeus and all of the gods. And they forsake Zeus and all of the gods because there's no way a god would do that to them. And they converted to Christianity at that time too. So when a pandemic comes, people want to find solutions. They want to find answers. And they really believe in their traditional ways. And when they're challenged that way, sometimes they give their ways up. This time with this pandemic, instead of running away from our ways and converting to a different way of doing things, our group actually ran towards the corn, ran towards our ways to help us with our mental health and with the uncertainty of the pandemic. So after the corn is picked, then we bring it to our barn that we rent, and we have to open up each one of those cobs. So we have to husk each one of the cobs. And this is something that takes days and days and days to do. So we have visitors that come to our barn. If our barn door is open during the fall, elders will just stop in and sit down with us and help us husk corn and tell stories about how they did that when they were kids and share with us tips and tricks to be better farmers. So each one of these has to be opened up. The ends have to be trimmed, and then we're ready for braiding. Braiding is taking 3 of the husks on each one of the cobs and braiding them together like you braid hair. And you usually put about 65 cobs on a braid, and then you make a little handle on the end with the extra corn husks, and then you hang them up in the barn. Sometimes the corn loses all of its husks, or they're not in such great shape and the husks aren't strong enough to hold the corn. So in the upper right, you'll see there's a stick hanging from the ceiling, and there's a bunch of corn stuck to it. That's an invention that we came up with so that the corn could still dry. So that would still be equal to 1 braid of corn, only it's drying in a different way. So braiding is a family event. I like to team braid. In the lower left-hand side, that's myself and my cousin Becky's mom, Michelle, and I'm teaching her how to braid the corn. So we're showing off our corn braid. I like to have 2 people braid, 1 person braiding and 1 person feeding in the next corn cob because it makes a nice tight braid. So look at this beautiful cob here. It's 13 inches long. It's got straight rows. It's got 8 rows all the way around. It doesn't have any dents in it or dimples. It doesn't have any colors in it. So this would be perfect for saving for seed. So when you're a corn grower, you're also a corn breeder, and you want the same genetics to get better and better in your field every year. So you would pick out the best cobs and you would save them for growing the following year. So as we're pulling those husks back on that big pile of corn every night, we find some really beautiful cobs in there, and we put those aside in a separate bin. And then my cousin Becky comes by and she looks them over and gives them the final in or out. And for the ones that she keeps, she braids them up, puts really decorative, beautiful bows on the top, and those are our seed braids. So on the measuring tape, you can see where number 13 to like number 10 is. That end of the cob is not seed. And where the number 3 is to the number 1, that is not seed either. That's soup grade. But everything in between, that's what we would save for seed, and we would grow the next year. So we have quite a few pounds of seed saved from year to year. We don't plant everything that we save, but we do try to use the oldest seeds first to keep them fresh. We also hang out with a lot of other corn growers that grow our variety of corn, and we trade seed every year so that our seed gets stronger and stronger. So some of the other activities that we do is we make corn husk dolls, and this is my niece. She's using some hand tools and she's making corn husk dolls in the barn. And Becky actually has a little business selling those corn husk dolls. She uses them to fund projects on her farm, her personal farm. So we like to share all of the knowledge that we have about our corn, about making tea with the corn husks, making tea with the corn silks, making corn husk dolls, using the corn husks to make moccasins or making mats. And we actually burn the corn cobs in our fireplace to make a really hot, beautiful fire outside in the fire pit. So we as Native people use every part of the plant. Okay, now it's January. It's freezing cold. I'm dressed up like a polar bear, and I have to weigh each one of those braids and put a number on them. The reason that we wait until that time of year is because when we hang up the braids in the fall, they have about 50% moisture in each one of those kernels. And we really want them to dry down to about 11% in the moisture meter. So then we know they're ready to hand out. So I go through and I weigh each one of those braids with another group of people. So they use a fish scale. They take the braid down from the hook, they weigh it, and they yell the number down to me, and I write it on a card and I put it on the braid. So each one of the braids is weighed, and then we do something to keep track of our hours every year. We have a private messenger board, and when I spend time doing things like this, I just put it on the messenger board that I worked with you guys explaining what we're doing, and I keep track of my hours. And then after I have 50 hours of hands-on with the corn, I get 1 share of corn that is counted at the end of the year. So last year I got 500 hours working with the corn, my husband and I, so we got 10 shares of corn. So we ended up with 1,000 pounds of corn this year. So after the corn is dried and I get my share, then I have to take it off of the cob, and that's called shelling. We used to shell by hand, but now we have little machines that shell. If you look in the picture on the right-hand side, you'll see some pie tins sitting on top of the corn cobs. We use those pie tins on the braids to keep the mice off of the corn. As soon as they touch that pie tin, they go for a little slide, and they slide right off the corn. So they cannot eat the corn when it's hanging up in the barn. Okay, now it's time to cook the corn. So we do something called hulling. Each one of those corn kernels has a little cover on it called a hull, and we have to take those off in order for us to eat the corn. So we use 1 cup of hardwood ashes that are sifted, and we mix it in boiling water, and then we add 1 quart of raw white corn, and it turns that beautiful color orange. That's called nixtamalization. And that is an old way of cooking the corn just to get the hull off of it. There's a chemical reaction that happens between the corn and the hardwood ashes. And that chemical reaction allows the corn to, your body to absorb the niacin that's in the corn. It's a really unique chemical reaction that happens. And this is one of the foods where that is a common practice. We get our hardwood ashes from the Menominee Nation. They have outdoor wood burning stoves, and they have lots and lots of timber to burn. So we trade them 1 metal garbage can of hardwood ashes for one 1-pound bag of dehydrated corn. And they love this trade. This is the best trade they could come up with. They actually fight over who gets the ash cans every year. And they really love our corn, and we use their ashes to cook our corn. It's a really great way to keep the trade routes open. So after the corn is boiled in the hardwood ashes until the hulls slip off, then you have to wash the corn in a corn washing basket to get the hulls off. And then you can cook it for another hour and you can use it to make soup, or you can put it in a dehydrator and take all the moisture out and store it indefinitely. So in the jars on the shelf, on the lower shelf, the white corn on the left-hand side is raw white corn. And then on the right-hand side, the brown corn, that's corn that's been cooked and dehydrated, and it's ready to go into soup and get rehydrated, and it's very delicious. Other ways that you can use the corn to cook with, very common, is above the word cooking, there's some pink corn that's called corn mush. You roast the white corn in the oven, then you grind it up and you cook it with hot water, almost like malto meal or farina. And then you add fruit to it and nuts and maple syrup, and it's a delicious breakfast. You can also make the corn into flour and use it for baking. The corn soup is at the bottom. Next to that is something called a corn fritter that's fried on a griddle. And in the bags, those are little tiny corn breads that are boiled. They're called ganastohal. And then in the top are like sweet cornbread tamales, and that's a common wedding cake. So for our barn rent, we didn't have a lot of money when we first started out. And so we traded with Twilight, and we made this beautiful beadwork for her. And I took that beadwork around to every single person in our group, even the men, and I made them put beads on there so that she knew it came from all of us. So Braiding the Sacred I was speaking about earlier, that's a nonprofit organization based in Onondaga Nation in New York. And they've had many corn gatherings with Native people all over North America. And at this place, we're at Ho-Chunk Nation in Black River Falls, and we're teaching the women how to braid our white corn. And they're sharing with us how they prepare their corn. So they dug a pit and they steamed corn underground. And they also boiled the corn and spooned it. They take it off the cob and they use a spoon, and then they dry it and they save it for later. So we share our corn culture with other people. And then on the table, those are all the varieties of Haudenosaunee corn that are grown at Onondaga. There's a black sweet corn, there's a red flower corn, a yellow corn, the Hiawatha or the blue calico corn, and then white corn, and they also grow a blue corn. So there is more than one kind of corn, but our group only focuses on the Tuscarora long white corn. So this is a picture showing all the different tribes and all the different foods that they grow. So it's not, the food revitalization isn't just happening in Oneida, it's happening all over Indian country. And these are some of the people that really help Native people grow their foods. Intertribal Agriculture Council has been very important to our group. They've been our fiscal sponsor. We are a nonprofit, we're a 501c5, but that does not give us the requirements that most grantors need. They need a 501c3. So they are our fiscal sponsor for our grants. And then the GLFWC, Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, they've been super helpful for the Ojibwe people up north. First Nations Development Institute has hosted all of the food summits that we've had in Oneida. And the Land Tenure Foundation helps to help Native people get back to the land. This is a really important slide. So if you went through this whole program and you only remembered one thing, I think this slide is the most important slide to remember. Because when you're talking about traditional foods, you're not just talking about the act of growing corn or the act of eating corn. There are all the teachings in there, the tool making. So in order for me to cook my corn, I have to use a black ash basket to rub the hulls off of the corn after I take the hulls off during the cooking process. Then there's the harvesting of that tree to make that basket. Then there's the preserving of the food, making it dehydrated or storing it in pits or however you want to do it. Finally, there's the cooking part of it, learning the traditional ways of cooking the food and then eating it. So growing traditional foods is a really big part of Native culture. So if we don't eat Native foods, we lose all of those pieces to that triangle and that pyramid. So it's really important for Native people to eat Native foods. So what has the impact of Ohelagu been on our people? The most important thing is consensus decision making. So we don't have one person who tells everybody else what to do. We have team leaders that took on these roles of being responsible for certain parts of the program. So like I told you, Becky is the seed carrier. She's the one that's in charge of the seed. She decides which ones we're going to save and which ones we're going to use. Another person prepares the fields. There's 3 teams that prepare the fields. Somebody else takes care of the funeral corn. So when Ohelagu had to decide how are we going to give back to our community that's given so much to us, we decided to set one side, 1 share of corn every year, and we get that processed into dehydrated corn, and we hand it out at funeral time to the families when they're grieving and it's the time that they need it the most. Access to land. In Oneida, even though we have land that the tribe has purchased back with the gaming dollars that I spoke about earlier, we've repurchased about 1/2 of our 65,000 acres. They're part of our reservation. And 1/3 of that is agricultural land, but tribal members don't have access to that agricultural land. And we went to the Land Commission as a group and explained what we wanted to do with growing this white corn cooperatively and not to make money, not as a business, but to keep our culture going and reintroduce native lands to our people. They changed the laws in Oneida so that we would have access to the land. There's also been a spiritual connection to the corn that's been revitalized in our group. We've also reconnected with our relatives out east, our mentors. It's really improved our mental health because when we're putting our hands in the soil and we're working with the corn, it really does something to your body and your spirit. And it's also connected the youth to the elders, which is very, very important to keep the traditions alive and keep the knowledge going. So what are the impacts of traditional foods and health? Traditional diets result in weight loss, improved insulin metabolism, decreased blood sugar levels, decreased blood pressure, improved levels of cholesterol and triglycerides, reverse heart disease, and have a really great impact on the amount of people that are diabetic in our community. Eating traditional foods has been proven through study to improve native health. Thank you all for listening. I know I spoke really quickly. I wanted to get through in my time allotted, and I really wanted to share this important story with you. Yanko. That's all I have.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Laura. We have Ivy now from our Joshua co-president, and she'll introduce the next speaker.
Yeah, I am so happy that you're all here. Laura, my head is spinning with all the information you shared. I cannot wait for the question portion of tonight's event to ask you all of the things. Let me pull up, just give me 1 second. I want to introduce Stephanie. And Stephanie Muskovich Van Every is a multimedia artist, Iroquois potter, and Oneida language and culture instructor in Oneida, Wisconsin. She received her BA in education with a concentration in Broadfield social studies from Alverno College in 2003. Stephanie continued her education at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay, receiving her master's degree in educational leadership in 2011. She received the Herb Cole Fellowship for Excellence in Teaching. Stephanie has studied with numerous elders across the Iroquois Confederacy, honoring her skills in Oneida language and culture, silverwork, regalia making, pottery, storytelling, and computer graphics. Welcome, Stephanie. And Stephanie, if you would introduce yourself in your Oneida name and maybe tell us what your Oneida name means, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. Galuhya gong le niung ya. Again, yanta loda onegan niwaga hunjoda. So my and what that translates to in English is rare sky. And thank you much for asking me to come share information on the cultural aspects of our seeds family. And they have that a lot of that feminine energy, and I really am an activist towards female rights, especially the rights that were given to us through our traditional ways. So with that, I guess we could get started. What we're going to talk about first is just a little bit of setting some ground. And I just want to make a statement that everybody has their own ways and their own set of ways that they do things and their own understanding of things within our tradition. And when I've had the opportunity to sit with different elders, I've learned that sometimes each one of them have a different piece of the puzzle. And sometimes some of them will have different ideas, and it's all okay. Because within our understanding, within our cultural beliefs, the Creator gives everybody their own directions for how they're supposed to be living. And it's not our job to judge or to say that they're incorrect, or for anybody else to take ours as the complete rule. So that's not what I'm doing. I'm just sharing what I've heard and what I've learned, and hopefully you'll walk away from here with the same type of enthusiasm that I have. Uncle Laura, for your presentation. There's two sides to living Ungwe Hue, and one of them is the spiritual part, and another one is the physical part, the actual doing. And I know a lot of people embrace the spiritual part. They go to ceremonies and they make sure that the different responsibilities within the longhouse are fulfilled. But in many ways, we're missing that other part that Laura and Ohelogu are fulfilling, and that's the taking the words into action. And in order to have a healthy community, a healthy family, it's important that we merge the two. They go hand in hand together. And so with that said, I'm going to start my presentation. On seed significance. I hope I'm screen sharing now, because all of you disappeared.
Yes,
Oh, there
you
you
are.
are.
Yep, you got it.
All right, seeds and Oneida perspective. And again, this is just perspective, and that from other elders throughout the Six Nations. And I am Galu Hyagon. So the first thing that I thought of when Maureen asked me to present is, well, what exactly is a seed? Because I know that every culture has their own perspective based on their values and their norms and their mores. So when I just tried to summarize what I thought our seeds were, I thought precious vessel, distinct cellular memory. And so we know that if they have a memory, well, then they're alive, right? Because you can't be an inanimate object without having some sort of life in you. Seeds are amazing. Seeds, the outside shell is the vessel, but then when you get on the inside, you have the little seed embryo, and you have the endosperm that's kind of like their food, or that helps them to survive. It's like seeds are a time capsule. And so everything that a seed goes through actually creates the type of hardiness or the type of weakness in the next seeds that they create. When I say that they are tiny time capsules, we also know that they develop their own methods of distribution. So they're so smart, so they know that they're going to be heavy, maybe heavy like a coconut. And so they need to make sure that they have the correct outside around them that is going to allow them to procreate. If you think of like a dandelion seeds are so smart, because what do they come with? They come with their own little like paraglider. They're geniuses. And that's something that their ancestors have developed over time based on the environment that they live in. Another thing is that plants really relate to women. We have a lot in common. In fact, I would say that our feminine energy is the same energy. Not only do they begin with the embryo and the endosperm, but also as seeds are coming down the ovaries, that's where they pick up a lot of their distinct characteristics that make them change. They really are truly feminine, because if you have a piece of fruit and that fruit has a seed in it, the seed also carries all of the knowledge and the ability for new seeds to come from that one, of course, by fruiting first. And the way that relates to women is because women too, when one woman gives birth to a little girl or has a little girl, that little girl is born with all of her seeds. So if you think of it, seeds as well as women have the ability to be 3 generations in one, or fruit as well as women have the ability to be 3 generations in one. So I guess what I'm saying is that seeds are amazing, that they relate to the feminine energy. So if you are a feminist, then you should probably be a seedist too. Seedist? I don't know if that came out right. So the seeds relate back to the sky woman when we think about, well, where did the first seeds come from? So, sorry, in an old story, a woman fell from the sky world, and she landed here on a turtleback. Now, when she fell, she brought seeds with her. She was a woman. And remember, I told you when women are born, they have all of their seeds with them. But we also call them eggs. So she's got all of them with her. And so she's falling from the sky. And as she falls through this hole in the sky to get down to the back of the turtle, well, she tries to grab whatever she can. And so some people say that she managed to grab roots. But other people also say that as she fell through this hole, you need to think about a tree, and you think about all the things that are around the bottom of the tree, that she also managed to carry different seeds upon her hair and upon her body as she was falling through. Seeds are so smart. And so they too clung on to her as she fell from the sky world. And so when Sky Woman landed on the turtle's back, the animals got her some soil. This is the next part of how smart the Sky Woman was and how important the woman's role is within our culture. So she has all these seeds, and she knows that she needs soil to survive. And so she plants the soil. And not only, she plants the seeds and the roots. And not only does she plant them, but every day she goes out and she cultivates the soil, and she rubs her feet in the soil, massaging it, but also tending to it, moving in a counterclockwise direction. And as she does this, the soil spreads and spreads and spreads. That right there is the first time that women took responsibility for the land. And from that day forward, it always was women's responsibility over the land and over the food. And so she continued to move around and around and around. And as she took care of the soil, she also did things. Laura was talking about how you put things in the soil because you know what the plants need to grow. And so Sky Woman was also in charge of that. And as she did it, she sang to the plants. And she would sing a women's dance song. And we have our old women's dance songs that go back to several of our ceremonies. And we also have modern women's dance songs. And so there's this one that I really love. And so I'll sing it for you, okay? So imagine that there's this large bit of earth, and as we dance around it, it's going to continue to get larger and larger and larger. And it is going to be a space for not just you to live, but for all of your sustenance and your future generations as well. Let me think how it goes. Yeti sota oguha wakwanu eladu ize agwegu se wali wendeli kaina ya yeti sota oguha wakwanu eladu ize agwegu se wali wendeli I know ya hey ya we ya hey we ya hey we ya hey ya we ya hey ya we ya hey honey oh hey oh ya hey we ya hey oh ya hey ah we ya hey honey oh hey I know ya hey ya. Yeti sota okuha. Wakwanu elatu. Ize agwegu. Ze wali wendeli. Kaina weahe, weahe, weahe. Weahe, weahe, weahe. Hey, honey, oh, hey. We are here, we are here, we are here, we are here, honey, oh, we are here. So some of the seeds that they say that she brought with her was tobacco and strawberries. And there's differing opinions on this. But regardless, she took care of that soil, she took care of those plants, and she started that sense of gratitude. Before she did anything, she asked the permission of the animals that had already lived there in the water world, which is where she landed, if I didn't mention that, on the turtle's back. She asked the permission of the turtle, that asked the permission of the birds, everything that came in to help her. She made sure that she had consent. And so then as she continued to build those things, remember I told you that she had her seeds with her? Well, one of them was fertilized. She was pregnant with a baby girl. And so eventually that baby girl was born in a gentle, nurturing way. And that little baby learned everything that her mother had learned and had developed. And so now we have our very first two women stewards of the earth and of the plant life. And so they're going around showing gratitude and giving thanks and tending to the soil and building the soil up. I think today we'd probably call it composting, right? And so as they would go along doing that, the daughter ended up becoming pregnant. And she was pregnant with two twins. Now, things happened and she died. And as she died, the son, we'll call him the creator, took her body and created a mound around her. And now from this mound grew seeds. And from the seeds grew corn from her breasts and beans from her fingers and squash from her belly. And some people even say potatoes from her toes and tobacco from her mind. Now, as these three in the center grew, the corn, beans, and the squash, what we call them today is the three sisters. And so, of course, because she was in the earth, we call that was where the concept of Mother Earth evolved from. And so we have our Mother Earth. And just as a mother today carries her babies in her womb, gives birth to them, and then continues to feed them with her breast milk, this mother birthed her babies. And though she was passing on to the next adventure after life, she was still giving to her children. And what did she give them? The corn, beans, and the squash. And so again, so these seeds grow. So again, back to our creation story, seeds are integral. So these seeds grow and they grow into plants and eventually they bear fruit and they form this amazing relationship because the corn is like the eldest sister and and she's like the leader, and before anybody does anything, she'll go and check it out first as she grows high into the sky. And then you have the beans that wind all around her and they're able to depend on her. But in the same way, she depends on the beans because the beans give her strength so that the winds can't blow her over. And then the next sister grows and the squash grows all around the land, all around the base of the other two sisters. And what she does is she has prickly vines that deter any kind of little varmints, rabbits, raccoons, chipmunks, maybe even deer from coming over and taking the food. But also her great big leaves act like almost like little umbrellas, only instead of keeping water out, what they do is create condensation and help the earth or the soil stay nice and moist. So these, what started out to be seeds, have now become a model of relationships that we are to follow. Within the creation story, we are told that we are to behave like these three sisters, and that we're to be gentle and caring with each other, and that we have the natural ability in order to offer each other love, to depend on each other and to protect each other. Okay. And they're also sharing sustenance because the beans is putting the nitrogen back into the earth. So this is seeds. You see where we're going here? We're going from something that maybe modern society believes is inanimate, and you can make a bunch of them into a factory and put pesticides on them and bam, 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 throw them in the ground. But that's not the way it works. So since we're starting to get to modern times now, we're still working with our same sisters. We're still working with these plants, these young women, and the earth. She's a woman too, okay? And so we have this feminine society going on. And the only place that we can get our sustenance from is from those feminine beings. So from our Mother Earth, we still continue to get the gift of nourishment. We still continue to follow through with the companion planting. I mentioned 3 sisters, but you know what? Laura mentioned clover. She chooses to plant clover between her rows of corn so that it can slowly share its nitrogen with the corn so that the corn can grow taller. What happened too is the creator and his twin went around creating more and more plants. And the thing is that wherever the creator created a plant, his twin would create a plant. And one of them might be poisonous to us, but the other one would be the antidote to the poison. And that still happens today. Seeds are so smart. They can create their own little home. They create their own way of transportation. And they also create friends, right? And just like the 2 twins, you have that balance there. So where one plant grows, its partner grows near. Our ancestors refined those seeds with mastery. They knew how to go out into these huge gardens. I mean, miles and miles and miles wide of gardens. And they knew how to pick out just the right seeds. And why is that important to pick out just the right seeds? Because remember, I told you that seeds have memory, and whatever they've been through, they're going to pass on to the next generation. The same with women. Okay. So with these seeds, you're going to want to take the corn that grows on a nice straight stalk, right? And you're going to want to take the cob from the corn stalk that grows at about eye height, because then it's easier to pick. Yeah, even something like the height where your corn grows from can be reproduced. And so then once you open your corn up, the amount of rows matters and how healthy each of the kernels is. And each one of those tiny strings needs to reach down and touch the baby seeds within that corn husk in order to make it grow into an actual kernel. So how efficient is it? Do you have a bunch of kernels, or do you have some that are not there? Or do you have maybe some mold on there? All those things make a difference with our seeds. And again, we compare to our women. When we pick a partner, it's so important, not that you pick one that's this high, but that you want to pick one that relates to the future that you want to have for the next generations. And that's how we pick our seed. So what our ancestors did, and today what we do, is we go out and we pick our corn seed based on how it's growing, how healthy it is. Maybe there was a drought and it survived through the drought and it's really healthy. Or maybe there was a great big flood and it survived through the flood. Well, perhaps you could take the seeds from the drought hardy and the flood hardy plants and plant them together, and then they're going to mix. Okay. And then you're going to get some really strong weather resistant corn. We do all of that without GMOs, without genetically modified organisms. We do that without pesticides, because whatever we put into our food, we're also going to put into us. I'm sorry, I started talking and I forgot about all these. So precise selection has been honed, and the caliber of our plants has maintained to the best of our ability. Now, we hope that it grows to the best of our ability, but the plants that we grow today and the seeds that we have today are not as strong and magnificent as the plants that we used to grow. And part of that is because of culture and how we take care of our soil. Remember I told you that Sky Woman was taking care of the soil. She knew about composting and things like that. But unfortunately, our soil has dwindled in nutrients quite a bit. So that if we were to eat one corn 500 years ago, and we would get nutrients out of that, of course we process it. Today, we would have to eat 5 of the same corn in order to get the same type of nutrients. Well, why is that? It's because of the soil, and also probably because of the way that the seeds have been kept, or the availability of seeds. Another thing that was talked about was if you have these great big fields, then if the animals come in and they eat it, well, if you have the great big fields, you also have more corn to choose from. And it's been a very long time since people had started back working as a team and creating these huge fields. And so what we're thinking of now is we're thinking of our seeds, we're thinking of them as babies, and we're thinking of the plants and Mother Earth as feminine energies just like us. That's our mother and that's our sister. Our food is central to our culture, including our health. I've heard a lot of people say that our food is what makes us sovereign. So if you have control of your food, then you pretty much have control of your life. And that's also including, I know Laura talked about when COVID hit, they had control of their food. They had a system. So they didn't have to worry about if the grocery stores were going to shut down because they had it all there for them. And they even had some stored from the previous year. So we also talk about how our food is important for our health today. Our guts have formed a relationship with our food. Whatever food our mothers eat as indigenous foods, those foods have been eaten by our ancestors all the way up in today. And so when we eat them again, our recognize that food. And so they're able to put it where it needs to go in order to make sure that we're heart healthy, in order to make sure that our blood is healthy, in order to make sure our skin, our hair, our nails, that everything is up to par the way that the creator intended. And so we want it. We want to have control of those seeds. We don't want them getting crossbred with genetically modified things. We don't want them to be sprayed with pesticides. We don't want any of those things. The seeds that our ancestors cultivated are the seeds that are going to give us the true health, that are going to keep us from getting different cancers or different diseases. It's truly central to our, not just our physical health, because I mentioned a lot of physical, but also our mental health, because what we eat affects our, how do we say that? What we eat also affects our guts and our hormones, which affect our brain and the way that we think, the way that we're able to process information, as well as spiritual, the way that we spend time together. And so having this relationship with our food is important. And we live a better life if we have that relationship, if we grow it ourselves, if we have the ability to protect it, if we have the ability to store it, if we have the ability to integrate it into our daily food. With all of this said, we continually as Ngwaihui people honor and thank our seeds, and we do this in many different ways. One thing that we do and that we're instructed to do every morning as the sun is rising, even before you possibly open your eyes, is to stop and give thanks. And we start with the things nearest to us and the things around the ground. And we build up and give thanks for everything in the natural world, all the way up to the sky world. And so part of this Thanksgiving address talks about the plants and the seeds and how they're continuing to do our job, their job as our sustenance. We also hold ceremony. There's a ceremony that'll coming up soon, ceremony. And seed ceremony also reminds us of how our ancestors used to live. And it kind of reminds me of how we should be living. Okay, like how I talked to you about before, there's the spiritual part that, you know, we're really, really working on, but then there's the part where we act things out that need to happen. So for seed ceremony, before we go into the gardens, the first thing that we do is we give thanks for the seeds and for the fact that they're here. And then we give thanks for everything in the natural world that helped the seeds to be here. And then when we go out into our gardens, our ancestors would build a small fire. And in that fire, they would burn the leftover corn cobs or the leftover ropes from where the corn was hanging. And they would take their best wood and they would burn that too. And this is before they even enter the garden. Our ancestors would stop and ask permission. So they would ask permission because they knew that they were going to be in there and they were going to be breaking open the soil. And by opening that soil, you're opening your Mother Earth. And then by opening it, perhaps you're going to be injuring some bugs or some biomes down there. And then you're going to be sitting in there and tearing things up. And so maybe there's going to be home of something that you might be removing. And so when I talk about this as something that is important in modern times, yes, we should still be asking consent of our Mother Earth and talking to our Mother Earth and saying, first of all, is it okay if we enter into the garden and do this? And this is why we're going to do it. And then next you say, can you please help us? And then after you say, can you please help us? Then you show your gratitude and you give thanks. And this is something that I said we do first thing in the morning, we do at night, and we do throughout the day when necessary. And before you start breaking open Mother Earth and entering your garden, you ask her consent. Just imagine if everybody had this philosophy ingrained in their minds, how the treatment of women would change, right? Because right now that word is a big deal, consent, you know, before you do something to a woman, you need to have her consent. No means no, right? So again, the information about seeds, the information about feminine energy, about feminine responsibility and inherent feminine rights stems from the fact that they are so precious. Women are seeds, as ngwehunwe, as earth, are so important for us, for our life. And so that's why it's very important that we continually show gratitude and ask permission. So we also do the green corn ceremony and harvest ceremony. So ceremonies, another thing that we do a game that we play, and we actually use seeds. Another thing that we do is we have our harvest ceremony where we give thanks for the seeds, and we have a green corn ceremony, which is all about babies. And you think about when you see a brand new baby and you just hope that baby grows really good and really strong. Well, that's what we do at our green corn ceremonies. We give thanks for those babies, that they continue to grow. And we even include our own children within that Thanksgiving. And so you think when we do our ceremonies, it's not one then the other, but it's all of the life giving and all of the life givers and all of the life that we give thanks for all together. Another thing that I wanted to talk about briefly was that there was a time when we forgot about being thankful for the seeds. There was a time when we forgot about being thankful for the food. And you know, this has happened more than once since the time of creation, and different things have happened in order to remind us. And in the 1800s, there was a situation that reminded us. One of our elders went out and he was walking among his fields and thinking that it was time for him to go back to the sky world. And as he was walking, something grabbed his shoulder and he looked back, but he couldn't see anything. And so he kept on walking, and then something grabbed his shoulder again and said, hey, wait. And he stopped and looked, and there he could see a face right in the corn. And the corn said to him, we know that you're going back to the sky world and we want to go with you. And he said, you know, like, shocked, who are you? What do you mean we? And she said, me and the plant life, my sisters, we don't want to be here anymore because the people have forgotten to give thanks. The grown-ups are forgetting to take care of us. And sometimes they come out and take care of us and they have mind changers in their bodies, and that burns our leaves. And they said, and the children just run up and down, trampling us into the ground. And so we don't want to be here anymore because the people don't respect us. And so Scania de Leo said, well, I can't do that, because only the creator can say when somebody's time here is over. But one thing that I can do is promise that we will include you within our Thanksgiving, and that we will also hold ceremony and retell this story regularly. And so to this day, we still do that. And many Ongwai people wake up and the first thing that they do is give thanks. And it's for those seeds and the things that help the food to grow, the sustenance, everything that makes our lives good. Another thing that we do is we continue to do the moon ceremony. The moon ceremony was rejuvenated a few years back out in Ganandagan. And so to this day, we do our best to meet on the full moon. And that moon is so important because she's the leader of the women, but also she lets us know when to plant different plants, when to plant seeds. And so I can give you a little hint right now that anytime it's a full moon, you want to plant the root stuff. So like the onions or the carrots, things that you're going to harvest for the roots, or you need the roots for teas or tinctures. And then when you have the new moon, which means you look in the sky and there's no moon up there, that's the time when you want to plant things that you're going to use the leaves or the above ground foods for. Okay. And so our grandmother moon also, she's integral in this feminine energy, and she's our leader. And so because of Scania de Leo, we remember to give thanks for them every single day. Though it has been a tradition that goes back to the beginning of time when the sky woman fell from the sky world and she had her daughter, and the two of them would go around and cultivate the soil, nurture the seeds, and tend to the plant life. And so to this day, we are one with that feminine energy. We are what we eat. And we remember that seeds have their own unique story from the beginning of creation. Seeds are grandchildren to our Mother Earth. Throughout time, they have been nurtured and refined through our generation. Our ancestors specifically went through and made sure that these seeds got here for us. They carry the essence of their own ancestors. If they're going to be drought resistant, if they're going to grow tall, if they're going to have broad leaves. And all of those past seeds, they fed our forebears. So definitely seeds are worthy of our love and gratitude. And we need to remember that their presence is terminable. They don't have to stay here forever. We need to live among with them and continue that sisterly relationship where we care for them and they care for us, because in the very end of things, they are our family, Akwaji. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about seeds or the importance or ceremonies, but that's all that I have for you today. And so thank you very much for listening. Someone take me off of presenting. Okay. There you go.
So incredible. My cup is so full between Stephanie and Laura. You guys have just really shared so much wisdom and insight, and I am eternally grateful to both of you for spending some time with us this evening. We do have a couple of questions that came through the chat. Maybe some of them were for me, but I am going to ask them anyway. Laura, you talked about the seeds that you save, and Stephanie, you talked about this as well. Can you explain why the seeds in the center of the corn are the ones that are more sought after rather than the seeds that fall towards the ends of the corn stalk?
So if you look at the shape of the corn cob, the ones at the pointy end are smaller, So they're going to keep those genes going just because of where they landed on the corn cob. And then the ones on the bottom are just a different shape. They're not uniform in shape. So next time you get corn on the cob from the farm stand this year, really look at your corn cob and you'll see the difference in the two ends. What you really want are the symmetrical seeds that are in the middle.
And then in addition to that, it matters which seeds or which cobs you pull off of the stalk. So you have the stalk, and let's say that it's a 14-foot stalk. If you are really being specific, and you know, we don't have that much corn, so we don't have is the ability to be this specific. But if you want the best corn, what you would do is you would pick the corn that's eye level, because it's easy to pick. So my thing is it's just right here. It doesn't take as much energy. You don't have to bend down and pick one, reach way up and pick one in the middle. But sometimes if you can get like 3 of them right here, right in front of you, for that reason, for ease, that would be a reason why our ancestors, or what I've been told, that you want to go for the cobs that are in the middle of the stalk, eye level. So all these little intricacies, all these little details are so important.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. You talked about a share of corn, Laura. How much is a share of corn?
It depends on the harvest. So when in our most fabulous year, we harvested 10,000 pounds of corn, hand harvested it. And last year we got 2,000 pounds of corn because 2 of our fields failed. In one of our fields, the cranes took every single one of the corn plants, and the ones that made it through, the deer came through and got after that. So that was a failure, but an amazing learning opportunity. So now we're going to be doing things different in that field. So like Stephanie spoke about earlier, when you're going to put your seeds out, you have to plan to plant for the animals as well. And this is something that our relatives in Onondaga were talking about today on a previous call. They have a special garden just for animals. And when they do their ceremony, they tell the animals that that food is there just for them. And she has watched the deer walk through the field and go straight for the field that was planted for them and leave the rest of the corn alone. So there's a relationship with all the natural world that they still understand our language, and they can you know, be a friend of ours as well. You know, and then later on we can ask them for permission to harvest them later. So it's a beautiful relationship that we have with the natural world. Then in that field, we're trying a different system so we're planting more corn just for the animals, and then we're putting a fabric over it and we're planting more corn. So the key to success is plant more, even though it's more work. It's success, you know, for any kind of pest is plant as much as you can, that you can handle. So yeah, and then in our second field where we're doing the conservation planting with the clovers, there was a miscommunication between our helpers, and they planted the wrong cover crop, and the cover crop shadowed out the corn. And so then that corn didn't grow at all. It was only like maybe waist high, and it tried so hard, but it would just had the wrong cover crop in it. So we're learning, we're trying to do conservation planting, we're trying to feed the soil. And the funny thing that happened after that, after we realized that our whole field had failed, and that was 4 acres of corn, we went in and cut it down, and then our friend used that to feed his animals so it didn't go to waste. The community was complaining that somebody cut all their corn down. So not only are we training the cranes to come and eat in one field, we're training our community members to go and take corn from the other field, which I thought was hilarious. But in our third and fourth fields, we did get a half acre out of each one of them, and that was where we got the 2,000 pounds of corn from. So everyone has you know, like a responsibility to put their hours in on the messenger page, and then all the hours are added up, and then all the hours are divided by the amount of shares that we have. So you want to hit at least 50 hours hands-on with the corn so that you get 1 share. And then the more hours you put in, the more shares of corn that you get. So if you don't do 50 hours of corn for 2 years in a row, then you're eliminating yourself from the group. So we're not kicking anyone out. You're just choosing not to fulfill your responsibility, and therefore you're no longer part of the group. You can come back, but you have to have a regular member sponsor you. That's something we call under the wing, and that's how we get more people to join our group. It's a year of mentorship before you're a full member.
And that whole process is, I mean, you talked about fall, you talked about spring, you talked about like, I'm in the barn in January. So this is like a year-long commitment when you're talking about investing in corn.
Yes. So yeah, we didn't know that when we started. And before I started growing corn, I was a sailor in the summertime. My husband and I have a sailboat, and we would go sailing in the evenings, and we would have a lovely time. And now we don't do that anymore because the corn has taken over our lives. So everything that we do is revolving around, can we do it? Are we taking time away from the corn? So our friends are inviting us to New York for a social dance, a women's smoke dance competition on May 22nd, and we can't commit to going because we don't know what the weather is between now and then, or if our seeds are going to be in the ground. But we do get one break in the fall. We always go down to Oaxaca, Mexico for Day of the Dead, and that's at the end of October, beginning of November, and we're usually gone for a couple weeks. So we do get a little break during harvest time. But it is a lot of hours. 500 hours is a lot of hours of work to keep the group going. But it's our life. It's completely taken over our garage. It's completely taken over the barn. You know, it's something that we choose to do. And what we get out of it isn't monetary, but it is huge when you think about the ceremonial part and the spiritual part, and the relationships that we've built with each other. So my cousin Becky is the person who makes those beautiful corn husk dolls. We've been friends for a long time, you know, socially, but now we really, really know each other because we spend so much time in the barn together. And that's kind of a secret sauce that we have with our group, is that you have to be able to tolerate all of these personalities for hours and hours and hours and hours on end until the work is done. So it's not for the faint of heart or for people who have tender feelings, because we're kind of mean.
But I like how that tied back to earlier in your discussion when we were talking about your community, right? I love
Right.
that you said, you know, women worked 12 hours and then worked 10 hours. And the other time was spent on kind of figuring out what your interests are and what you can, what makes you happy. And that
Right.
community that you talked about. I feel like there's so much to unpack, and I know we don't have time to do it all. So I'm going to try to focus on just seeds and planting. One of the questions that came in the chat was the protein content. You talked about all the benefits from eating an indigenous diet, you know, lowering your blood sugar, stabilizing your blood sugar, triglycerides lowered, all of these benefits. What is the protein content of the traditional white corn is one of the questions that we had.
It's really high. So most people only have a relationship with green or with yellow sweet corn from the farm stand or from the grocery store in a can or in the freezer aisle. Sometimes you get it fresh. That is really high sugar and very little protein. And our white corn is very high protein, very low sugar. So you would only eat it like off of the cob, like normal yellow corn that you're used to, when it's in the green corn stage. So then it's immature and it's really sweet and it's delicious and it's soft and it doesn't have that hard coating on it yet because it's not fully matured. And so then you can grill it and you can eat it like sweet corn. And we do that too every year. We have a green corn ceremony.
When does the green corn, what time of year does that happen?
It's like mid-August, mid-September. Everything depends on the planting date. So it's around mid-September, yeah.
Awesome.
And the really amazing thing about the corn is that you cannot buy it at the grocery store. So you can buy a variety of beans at the grocery store, and you can buy a variety of squash at the grocery store, but you cannot buy heirloom white corn at the grocery store. And that's what makes it so incredibly important for us to keep it going and for Native people to grow Native foods, was that pyramid that I showed you, all the things that go along with it. So when I say I'm a farmer, everyone's like, yeah, everybody's a farmer, a big deal, or everybody grows a garden. What's so special about that? But the things that I'm telling you are all hands-on. And with a regular farmer with a combine, they never touch their seeds. They never touch their corn. Everything is mechanical. There's no relationship between the farmer and their produce or their product. It's all a commercial transaction. And that is not how we are raised or what our belief system is.
I love that you said that, because as you were both talking, I was thinking about just the intimate relationship that you have with the food that you're growing, that you're working with, and how that translates into a better, more nutritious, more sustainable way of eating. So I really appreciated that. One of the questions that came in the chat was, where can we purchase corn husk stalls to support that lovely child in one of the photos?
So the corn husk stalls that I'm telling you that are for sale actually support another farm called Unguaqua, and you'd have to friend Rebecca Webster on Facebook, and she has those same dolls on her Facebook page. And then she only sells them like rarely, like she just sold a whole batch last week. So they're really in high demand because she doesn't make them very often. And she used the last batch of money to build a high tunnel. And she planted a different variety of corn in that high tunnel, and that corn is coming up already. So, you know, she does really amazing things with the money that she raises from making her corn husk stalls. So I don't even have a corn husk stall connection. I couldn't even get one from her if I wanted to. So they're just when she has them available, and she does post it on Facebook. So she doesn't take orders. It's just whenever she can get to making them. She has to put on her Wonder Woman cape and make those corn husk stalls.
Yeah, definitely. Stephanie, I wanted to talk a little bit about your comments around feminism and Mother Earth and the seeds and all of that of a connection. I don't want to assume, but how did you learn, both of you, I guess, how did you learn about this? I grew up in this area. I went to public schools. And there wasn't a lot of information about Oneida traditions, Oneida history. So how are you getting your information?
Sure. Well, actually, it's a partnership. So growing up, I was a longhouse since I was about 15. And so there's information there. As I became a teacher, I began to do more research and talk to different elders. Has been long involved in Native American activism and going to different places and teaching. And so I learned from him. But when the feminine connection really came in was when I became a mother. And I started learning about birthing, and I became a birth instructor. That's when I realized that a lot of the things that we had been taught were not serving us, or they were just serving us, that actually they were causing more harm than good. And that's when I started to really learn more about what our bodies are capable of. And also I worked as a language trainee for several years at the Oneida Language House. And so because of that, I was able to see the different connections between healthy birthing practices, the different stages of life that women go through, and our ceremonies. And our ceremonies actually are very, they're very much about reproduction, just as our life is today. Only thing is it doesn't have that shame attached to it, that it's a natural, healthy thing, and that it's something to be thankful for. And it's also just the same way that we take care of our soil. That's the same way that we should be taking care of our women, I guess. So yeah, I just, just from experience, I have 5 children, and learning how to birth or learning how to birth on my own. I guess my last 2, I birthed by myself. And so just, becoming a woman. And, you're right about it not being available, because I have my grandmother on my mom's side had 21 kids, and I went to half of them are aunts, and I went to as many of them as I could, and I asked them, and they didn't know. They didn't know anything about birthing, anything about gardening. They didn't know anything about anything. And then come to find out that there's all this wonderful about women and how treating each other, and how important women are and how we affect each other. And it's through example, it's through story. So it really became a passion of mine because I thought, you know, if nobody told me these things, um, I don't know where I'd be in my life. You know, if nobody told me emotion, everything that you put in your body impacts the next generation. Every feeling that you feel creates a hormone and a chemical reaction in your body that affects the seeds that you're carrying. And the same thing happens to our seeds in the garden. Whatever they go through is going to affect the next generation. They go hand in hand. And as you learn more, and hopefully as time passes, I know I teach at the elementary school in Oneida, and I tell them. So hopefully as time passes, this will be information that's widely available, not just to our women, but to all women. Because all women are as precious as earth. All women are as precious as our sustenance, as our food, as life givers.
Beautiful.
That was beautiful. So my path is a little bit different. My mom was a active gardener when we were growing up, so we always had food that was growing in the backyard, and we harvested strawberries and apples, and she made strawberry jams and applesauce and apple pie filling and those kind of things. And so I grew up eating really healthy food when I was a young child. And then when I got a little older and moved away from home and I made my way up to Oneida, I gravitated towards the Environmental Resource Board, and I started working for them. And I learned a lot about food and the environment that way. And I started volunteering at our organic farm, Junhinqua. And so I would go to the harvest ceremonies there, the husking bees, and I would learn all about corn there. And I didn't really start growing my own white corn until my daughter came home from a trip out east. She was in one of the territories, and she had run out of white corn that she brought from Oneida, and she wanted to replenish her stock. And they said, oh yeah, just go down the street to Joe's house and buy the corn from him. And it turned out that Joe was the non-Indian farmer. And she couldn't believe that that nation was relying on somebody else to grow their food for them, even for their ceremonies. So she came home and she told me that. I said, that's it. We're growing white corn. We cannot let somebody else do this responsibility for us. We have to take care of ourselves. And we started growing corn together, just my little family, and we failed miserably. It was horrible. We had 4 acres of weeds. We got very little corn out of there. When the grandkids went through and they found a little cob, they said, oh, thank you. And they kissed it. We love you. We knew you could do it. We had faith in you, you know, but we were the ones that failed the corn at that time. So we went to the food summit and we met with all of our Haudenosaunee relatives that were there from the East. And we asked them real pointed questions. I had survey questions to ask them, like, what are we doing wrong? And how can we do this better? And that's when we came to the realization that we need to grow as a community. We can't just grow as little backyard farmers. We have to do this the old way. And they really helped us understand that. So that's my journey to growing food. And I never do anything by myself. I always get a whole bunch of people to come with me and do these crazy activities with me. So when I said, hey, let's grow as a community, they were like, okay, well, you know what you're doing because you put in the trails and you did the solar system and you did this and you did that. So obviously, you know what you're talking about. I really didn't, but they were along for the ride and we all learned together. So at that first community meeting that I showed you that picture of, I had a little board and I was saying, okay, this is what the grounds look like. And we're just going to plant 3 acres. And one of the ladies said, hey, wait a minute. Why aren't we planting a whole 13 acres? And I was like, hold on, let's just learn how to do this first before we go 13 acres. And then I took her out to the field and I showed her what 3 acres of plowed up looked like. And she's like, oh my God, I'm so glad we didn't do the 13 acres. I was ready to pull my hair out right there. But I told them as a group, if you guys abandon me and I'm standing out in this cornfield picking corn in December and crying, I'll never forgive you. So that's when we made the agreement to keep working together.
And that, like, just that story, that arc of your journey, you're going back to your roots, right? Because that's how your ancestors did it, right? They did it as a community. It wasn't just one person growing all the corn. So
when we had that community meeting, I was thinking like Hmong community gardens, you know, like this is going to be the Webster's part and this is going to be the Manthe part and that's going to be the this part and that part. And it was my friend Don Sharnon who said, no, No, we're not doing it that way. We're growing it collectively. We're going to pool our seeds. We're going to plant it together. We're going to harvest it together, and we're going to eat it together. So I had actually decolonized my mind at that time and put aside all the thoughts I had about ownership and this is mine and that's yours, because that's how we were raised in public school, right? And I had to think back to, okay, now how did our ancestors do it? And really, that's the only way that our group has been successful, is that nobody owns that corn. Everybody owns that corn. And it's really not anybody's corn until after the shares are distributed. So while it's in the barn and while it's in the field and while it's in the jar, it says seed on it, it doesn't belong to anybody. It belongs to everybody.
So beautiful. One of the questions that came in is the soil tilled when the corn is planted, or have you experimented with low till techniques?
Yes, we're experimenting with low till techniques in the second field. And so we have a seed drill that will drill the seeds right into the soil. And that's where we're experimenting with the cover crops. And that's where we're not being very successful. But there are years when we get it right and we get the right seed mix together and everything works out great. And then we have those big 16-foot, so it really depends on what the seed mix is. And we're working closely with the University of Wisconsin. Dr. Aaron Silva is our person who's helping us figure out what the seed mix is. And she's been wonderful. We have a grad student, Daniel Hayden, who is working with us and doing studies on our soil. We have some of our youth are hired to go out there and do like soil samples and do little square foot by square foot plant identification, so he knows what's growing out there. And we're really trying to make that a success. And when you talk with longtime conventional farmers, oh no, that won't work, you can't do that. So we're hoping, to prove them wrong. And we're willing to keep trying every year until we get it right. So we plan on harvesting that corn in the green corn stage this year, and then we're going to be taking it to Upper Michigan, to Marquette. They're hosting the Indigenous Food Summit this fall, and then we'll be grilling that green corn and we'll be sharing it with the other participants and cooking it with them. We plan on cooking it 3 different ways. So it's really great to share, and it's really great to keep those trade routes open between the tribes.
That was the other thing that I thought was really interesting, that you talked about the trade route with Menominee tribe and sharing that. How did that get established or reestablished?
So we knew we needed hardwood ashes to process the corn, and we had thousands of pounds of corn coming off of the field, and only 2 people in our group had fireplaces. So we knew we weren't going to be able to keep up that way. And I have friends that are Menominee, and I knew that they were using outdoor cooking or outdoor heating. So it's an outdoor wood burning stove, and they practically just throw whole logs in there and they heat their house all winter. And so I already had that friendship connection with Sandy. And so I just contacted her and I said, hey, would you be interested if we brought up these cans and then you could fill them with your ashes and then I'll give you dehy. And she thought that was the perfect perfect way for us to reciprocate to each other. I have something you need, you have something I need, let's work this out. And then we've also been able to trade our dehydrated white corn for wild rice with Bruce Savage up on the Fond du Lac tribe in Minnesota. And we've been able to trade for maple syrup with Jerry Jandrew's farm in Upper Michigan. So we're always looking for ways to trade for fish, berries, any kind of other indigenous foods. And we also trade for art items too that we can sell at our vendor booth. So we're really flexible about trading. And we're quite generous with our seeds with other tribes. I'm working with the Potawatomi Nation in Wisconsin. They want to start growing white corn, so I'll be going up there this summer and working with them to teach them how to do it. I don't just want to give them seeds and walk away, because there's so many little things that you need to know about how to care for this corn that they don't know. It's not part of their culture and their memory. So I have to go up there and teach them all the little steps so that they're successful too.
That shared knowledge piece, right? I'm going to try to pronounce this, and Stephanie or Laura, please correct me if I mispronounce it. Could you explain what Haudenosaunee is?
Haudenosaunee.
Haudenosaunee, thank you.
that's the name that we call ourselves. So Ungwehue is the original people, and Haudenosaunee is the name that means people of the Longhouse. Stephanie? Yes, she's the language teacher, so she knows more than I do. And that's like Stephanie was talking about the pieces of the puzzle. So when you have people working cooperatively with each other together with the same goal, so we have a like mind, and we all bring a different skill and a different level of energy. You know, sometimes my energy is really high in the morning and not so much at night. And other people are nighttime people, and they come in at 9 o'clock and they're, all right, let's braid up this corn you guys worked on all day. And they're crazy energy. And I'm like ready to fall over because I've been working on it all day. That's how we complement each other. And the question you had about the protein in the corn, I really can't answer that, but my friend Don Charnon can answer it like that because he has that kind of knowledge from his job. So we all really complement each other. We're like, that's why we call it braiding the sacred, because when you braid all that information together, you get stronger. You cannot break a braid. They are tough.
Thank you so much. I think that is all the questions that came through the chat. But I just, again, want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending this much time and sharing your wealth of information and wisdom with us. How can people get connected with you, with White Corn? Where can we go to help support the things that you're doing?
We have a Facebook page. It's Ohelogu Among the Corn Stalks, and you can like our page. And in that page, we tell you what's going on in our field and let you know when we have volunteer opportunities for people to come out. We're going to be hand planting a lot of corn this year, so there's opportunity to bring youth out. We like the kids to come out and plant with us because they bring all this amazing energy, and the seeds really love to hear them sing. So there's like a really beautiful symbiotic relationship that happens between the kids and the seeds. And then later on in the fall, there's a ton of work to do. That's the best time to come out and visit because it's almost like a 3-ring circus. There's so many things happening. So one year we had Ho-Chunk people come out and help us with our harvest. And they walked into the barn and there were all these Oneidas in there. And we were like giggling and laughing and having a good time. And nobody was in charge, but everybody was working and everybody knew what to do. And they were like, oh my God, who's in charge? And we all said, nobody. Well, how do you know what to do? We just taught ourselves how to do this. We asked a lot of questions. We made a lot of mistakes, but we know how to get through this part of it. We've built up our capacity so that we can teach other people how to braid corn and teach them everything that we know about it. We're all equal in the barn. There is no hierarchy. And that's pretty amazing. It doesn't happen all the time.
Stephanie, how can people find you? You're an artist. How can people support what you're doing?
I have a website, S. Van Every, Iroquois Artisan. Online you could look up, or else you can find me at the Oneida Nation Elementary School. And then I also have a Facebook page, S. Van Every, Iroquois Artisan. So any of those ways you can locate me. It's pretty easy. If you just type Stephanie Van Every, I guess it'll pop up.
Great. I'm gonna turn it over to Bobby and she can share how folks can get connected with Joshua's environmental task force.
Thanks, Ivy. Yeah, so I think the best way to connect with the Environmental Justice Task Force, I think most of the attendees already are part of it. You can get on our email list, and it's joshuaforjustice@gmail.com. And then we also have a Facebook page. And I don't remember, I think it's just Joshua for Justice on Facebook.
It's Joshua Green Bay for the Facebook page.
For the Facebook, okay, sorry about that. I'm terrible at Facebook.
And
Yeah,
you meet, what day of the month do you all meet?
We meet the 4th Wednesday of each month, virtually for now.
We meet at 6 p.m. and you can find the link to the Zoom link on the Joshua website, which is joshuaforjustice.org, and it's on the calendar.
All right, have an amazing evening. Thank you all for joining us. I'm definitely going to be tapping both Laura and Stephanie for future conversations because I feel like we just kind of hit the tip of the iceberg. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your support.